Hello. Welcome back. The recent Idaho 4 murders aren't the only student murders that Idaho has seen. The murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. High school student Cassie Jo Stoddart had the world ahead of her when her life was cut short by two of her classmates, Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper, who wanted to become world-famous killers. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born on December 21, 1989. In 2006, she was a student at Pocatello High School, in Bannack, Idaho. She was dating Matthew Beckham at the time of her murder. Matthew knew Draper since 7th grade and Adamczyk from the previous school year. The four of them were all friends. Cassie Jo Stoddart agreed to house sit and take care of 3 cats and 2 dogs for Allison Contreras over the weekend of September 22, 2006. At the Contreras' Pocatello residence at Whispering Cliffs while the Contreras family spent the weekend in Wyoming. The Contreras' left their home at about 1 or 2 p.m. that day. Anna Stoddart, Cassie's mother, knew Cassie was going to house sit for the Contreras' that weekend, and Cassie had done so several times before. That Friday, Anna picked up Cassie and Matt Beckham, Cassie's boyfriend, after school ended at 3:30. And drove them back to the Stoddart residence where Cassie and Matt watched television and hung out. At about 5:30 that afternoon, Anna drove Cassie and Matt to the Contreras home and dropped them off. Anna called Cassie at about 7:30 that evening and Cassie told her she and Matt were watching a movie. Anna told Cassie to call her first thing in the morning and told her she loved her and would talk to her in the morning. Cassie had invited Brian Lee Draper and Tori Michael Adamczyk, friends from high school who had occasionally visited Cassie at her home, to come over at Whispering Cliffs residence that Friday evening. Brian and Tori arrived at the house at around 7 p.m. that evening. Cassie and Matt showed Brian and Tori came into the house and showed them around the home. The four then went upstairs and watched a movie. After spending approximately 2 hours at the Whispering Cliffs residence, Brian informed Cassie and Matt that he needed to leave and shortly thereafter Brian and Tori departed. During the movie, Brian and Cassie went downstairs, followed by Matt 15 minutes later, then Tori a couple minutes thereafter. The four played on a universal gym for about 10 minutes. Then went back upstairs to continue watching the movie. Before the movie finished, Brian said he had to be home by 9 o'clock. Brian and Tori asked Matt if he was going to spend the night at the house with Cassie. Somewhere around 9:30 p.m. Brian and Tori left the residence. After Brian and Tori left, Matt called his mom, Sherry Beckham, and asked if he could spend the night with Cassie at her cousin's house. His mom said no, but offered Cassie to spend the night at her home. Matt's mom recalled Cassie saying, "No, I have to let the animals out real early, I'm just going to stay." Matt and Brian spoke on the phone and Matt told him his mom was picking him up in a couple hours. Matt said that Brian was speaking in a whisper and when he asked why, he told him he was at a movie. Cassie and Matt sat on the couch watching television, waiting for his mother to pick him up. About 20 minutes after Brian and Tori left, all the power in the house went off. Matt turned on electrical switches, but nothing worked. As Cassie and Matt sat in the living room waiting for something to happen, one hallway light came on, but no other switches worked. While still sitting in the living room without the power on, one of the dogs began freaking out, growling as it repeatedly ran back and forth between the hallway and the living room. 10:30 p.m., Matt's mother picked him up, leaving Cassie at the house alone. Matt called Brian's cell phone to see where he and Tori were, possibly to meet up with them later, where Matt said his friend's voice was low. From the basement, Brian and Tori heard Matt leave. The teens turned the lights out again at the circuit breaker and waited, hoping Cassie would come downstairs to turn the lights back on. She did not. Eventually, the boys went upstairs. Brian was armed with a dagger-type weapon and Tori had a hunting knife. The weapons having been purchased at a pawn shop. Brian opened and slammed a closet door at the top of the stairs to scare Cassie, who was lying on the couch in the living room. As Cassie heard someone in front of her, she told them, "Leave me alone or I'll kick your ass." The boys then brutally attacked her, stabbing her approximately 30 times. 12 wounds were potentially fatal. During the investigation of the murder, police found that Brian and Tori had recorded their plan to murder Cassie in advance on videotape while they were at school. This video footage was shown at their trials. Therefore, they were arrested. They said they were inspired by the movie Scream, a horror film that was popular in 2006. After the murder, they fled the scene. They turned the camera back on saying, "I just killed Cassie, we just left her house." "This is not a fing joke," Tori interjected by saying, "I'm shaking, I just stabbed her in the throat," Brian said. "And I saw her lifeless body just disappear, dude. I just killed Cassie, it felt like it wasn't even real, I mean it went by so fast." Tori tells Brian, "A dude, shut the F up. We have to get our act straight." The teens continued driving to Black Rock Canyon, where they ended up burning and burying evidence such as knives, videotapes, mask and gloves. September 24, 2006. Cassie's relatives returned back from their vacation. Her 13-year-old cousin found her bloody, lifeless body on the floor in the upstairs. The Pocatello police spoke to Brian and Tori after interviewing Matt, who told authorities the two teens had been present at the Contreras residence on the night of the murder. 3 days later, they arrested Brian and Tori were arrested. An autopsy was performed on Cassie and was found Cassie had been stabbed 29 times, in which 9 were fatal. Forensic pathologist Dr. Charles Garrison later testified that most of the fatal wounds struck the right ventricle of Cassie's heart. The following day, Brian and Tori met up while Matt repeatedly tried to call Cassie. Her body wasn't recovered until 2 days after her murder on September 24, 2006. The responding officers noted that Cassie's body was covered in blood and riddled with deep lacerations and stab wounds. Tori was interrogated that same day, and he initially told detectives that he and Brian had gone to the house at approximately 8:30 p.m. to attend a party. When the party never materialized, he and Brian left the house to catch a film. After which both boys slept at Tori's house, but when the detectives probed Tori about the movie he had reportedly seen that night, he couldn't remember anything about it. 3 days later, Brian led law enforcement to a stash of evidence he'd buried in the Black Rock Canyon area. The evidence included 2 dagger-style knives with sheaths, a silver and black-handled knife with a smooth blade, a folding knife, a red and white mask, latex gloves, and a damning videotape that contained footage of both killers explicitly planning Stoddart's murder. The transcript of the tape, which was later read out loud in court, demonstrated the callousness of the pair, with Brian also exclaiming how they'll make history by becoming notorious serial killers. They referenced notorious serial killers like the Hillside Strangler, the Zodiac Killer, and Ted Bundy. They also mentioned being inspired by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the Columbine High School, and the horror film Scream. On April 17, 2007, Brian Draper was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. "One down, one more to go," Stoddart's grandfather Paul Cisneros said at the time. Her mother, Anna Stoddart, merely said, "I'm just happy. My baby got her justice." Tori Adamczyk's trial began on May 31, 2007, and he was convicted of the same charges on June 8, 2007. Both received life sentences in prison without the possibility for parole plus 30 years to life for the conspiracy behind their brutal slaying. Adamczyk and Draper are still serving their sentences at the Idaho State Correctional Institution. In September 2010, an appeal was filed on behalf of Adamczyk and one for Draper in April 2011. Their initial appeals were denied, and as of this video, both killers are appealing their convictions in higher courts. Before September 22, 2006, Cassie Jo Stoddart, Brian Draper, and Tori Adamczyk were all juniors at Pocatello High School in Pocatello, Idaho. According to her family, Cassie Jo led a normal life. She liked to draw and listen to music. 10 years after her murder, her brother told the Idaho State Journal, "I just miss having my sister right there, a grade above me. I felt like I was always a step behind her, looking up to her. She really was a role model. She was really smart, doing good, and had a lot going for her." In 2010, MSNBC released a documentary in honor of Cassie Jo called In Coldest Blood. Filmmakers interviewed the Stoddarts, prosecutors, and others involved with solving the case. After the Cassie's death, Cassie's aunt fell into a deep depression and lost her job. Cassie's cousin, the one who found Cassie murdered, fell into a depression and tried to take her own life. They said, the house was once among dreams, but now it's just turned into a nightmare. No one wants to buy the house where Cassie Jo was murdered. The Contreras family have put their house on the market every year since Draper and Adamczyk murdered Cassie Jo in 2006, but they are unable to sell the property. Frank Contreras told the Idaho State Journal, "We just want out, but we want to fulfill our obligation. We're at the point that we will take what we owe, $138,000. We just want to walk. But there is this stigma on this house." The murder devastated the Pocatello community, including the Contreras family. Frank, Cassie's uncle, reported he turned to alcohol to cope with the tragedy. Others, like convicted murder Adamczyk's mother, wrote a book about the crime. Shannon Adamczyk authored The Guilty Innocent to highlight what a nightmare the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddard and the subsequent punishment for the crime became for all the people involved. Thank you all so much for watching. Cassie's case has been coming up a lot lately since the Idaho 4 murders. Just like many believe, the Idaho 4 murderer is probably known by at least one or possibly all of the victims. Cassie knew both Brian and Tori, they were supposed to be her friends, but even friends murder. Let me know in the comments below if you think that this is someone close that knows one or more victims in the Idaho 4 case. Just as Cassie's family got justice, the Idaho 4 family deserves justice too. Hopefully justice will come soon. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to Justin for All, please go ahead and click that subscribe button and don't forget to ring the bell to all so you won't miss anything. Thank you all so much. We will see you on the next one.